welcome to Co-Opinions. My name is Josh, and today we have a full house. I have Brent.
Yep.
We got Mark.
What up?
And I got Mike.
How's it going?
So today we're going to be talking about our personal observations on the evolution of shooters throughout our lives, first and third person shooters prompted by Brent. But first, let's go around and talk about little things we've been doing since we last all met. Brent, why don't you go first?
Started up Watch Dogs 2.
And
I don't know if it's the mood I'm in or coming off Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Like, one of the two of them, I'm just not getting this game. It wants to be super tongue-in-cheek, and I'm not feeling it.
It reminds me a lot of how I was feeling playing Sunset Overdrive. Remember how I was saying sometimes you're not in the mood for it? And Mark,
I was always in the mood for it. That's just me. It's a personal thing.
This game
is a fun game, but go ahead, Brent.
Watch Dogs 2 is like if the Breakfast Club was multi-ethnical and hackers.
Say ethnical?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, the first one had a story problem.
Are we not going to address that?
We're not.
Okay.
Just go.
Just throw those ethics out the window.
Mm-hmm.
But, the first one, the problem with the story was you couldn't really sympathize with the protagonist.
Mm-hmm. And in this one, good times.
Like, the opening cinema is like, is everyone a bad guy? Are you a good guy? Or maybe you're just as bad as everyone else. And at no point does it feel like they're ever actually going to fulfill that promise. They're just going to keep, you guys are great.
So you're just probably going to knuckle down and barrel through this.
Yeah, get to FF15.
And I'm excited for you to start playing FF15 because this will be the first FF game I can ever recall you playing, you own...
I played FF7.
Yeah, but that was, 20 years ago?
No, 20 years ago. It was 11.
Okay. 11?
It's not 1 decade.
Why were you playing that game when you were 19?
Okay, more than 11.
Yeah, more than 11. So let's move on, and we'll get around to the other games you've been playing because that transitions directly into our topic for the evening. Mark, why don't you go ahead?
I pretty much, over the last day, smashed right through Bayonetta. Just because it is free with gold on Xbox, and it was a game that I wanted to get back when it came out, but I really didn't want to spend the money on it back then.
Right.
So, totally Sega-esque.
It's pure platinum games.
Yes.
I mean, it's
Over
overkill, crazy.
Totally over the top.
Does that game make you more interested in picking up Bayonetta 2?
Yes.
Which is supposed to be even better. Having played it, I'm not sure the story's quite as good, but the gameplay's crazy.
I was going to say, the story, I actually like the story a lot.
The story in the first one was really good. The story in the second one wasn't quite as strong for reasons you'll probably see, but the gameplay in the second one was really solid. So, but anyways, Mike, I understand there's an update for No Man's Sky you're pretty excited about.
Yeah, I would like to talk about a game that I will not be playing. That game. I will have to bleep that.
That's pretty exciting.
But seriously, no, I'm done. Nothing they can do. Salted the earth. They're done forever. I will never play that game again.
Great times. Anything you do want to talk about?
No, other than that, I'm good.
Okay, cool. So, since I last recorded, I destroyed the game Sundered I talked about last. It's surprisingly good despite all the bugs that's involved. I really wish they'd beta tested it on the PS4 because the problem I'm running into is I'm seeing a lot of dropped frames. I'm seeing it can be a little jittery sometimes. It's crashed on me a handful of times. But all that being said, I still beat the sin out of it. So it was still fun. And I'm really interested to replay the game. The concept behind it is you get these items that can enhance the abilities you're using. But if you use them to enhance your abilities, you sacrifice your humanity. If you use every one of those items to enhance all your abilities, you basically become an elder god and then destroy the world. Spoilers, by the way, in case anybody's actually going to play this game. I loved it. I can't imagine anybody else. Have you ever even heard of Sundered?
I saw it on your thing, so yes, I've heard of it.
You heard about it from me, didn't you?
Probably.
There we go. Same with you, Mike.
Yeah, I heard about it from a friend.
Yeah, fancy that. Who was that? Anyways. The other one I've been doing is I've been replaying the Danganronpa games because the third one is coming out in September. This caused me to have an interesting experience with what I have since dubbed the Troll Hill, as to not make a mountain out of it. I was playing the second one, and I've already beat the first and second games because I beat them on the Vita, and there's a spin-off I have yet to get to, but as I was replaying the second one and streaming it, somebody wandered into my stream. I'm like, hi, how are you? At which point they told me, in this case, this person did it, in the next case, this person did it, and they proceed to run down the whole game and try to spoil the whole thing for me. Like, well, thanks, Dick, but I've already beat the game, and I blocked him. Next thing I knew, there's like 12 people in there. Like, oh, hi, friends. And they go, so, have you played the third one? No, I'm super psyched for it. Okay, well, and then spoiler, 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 spoiler. Luckily, I got a hint of what was about to happen, so I immediately closed out of it and then turned my chat off. But I've never actually dealt with these people who aggressively try to spoil things. Now, a guy we had on a while back, Alex, the one who's associated with Extra Life.
Yeah.
Is it Extra Life?
Yes.
Okay. He apparently has encountered this himself, and he says sometimes there's just people who want to watch the world burn. And I personally, if this is all they have to really make their dark and dreary lives better, more power to them, I suppose. I can just stop listening. There's no never-ending assault to see me burn. But since then, I've streamed a couple more times, and I've seen a surge of people come into the stream, and then about 7 seconds later, they all leave, probably because the chat's turned off. It will remain turned off until October, just because that's when I'll have this other game beaten. So I just thought that was an interesting experience. Brent, I know you're opposed to trolls in all their many forms.
Yes.
So I thought you'd be able to find that some degree of entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of entertaining, Brent, you decided that you were going to play some old N64 games because you had Rare Replay and you decided you wanted to get around to some classics. How did that go?
Yeah, well, last time I talked about it, I'd finally beaten Perfect Dark, which was, a vomit-inducing fest for me for some reason because of, I guess, allergies. And
Well, you thought that it might also be because...
Well, gameplay-wise, the controller, but I think frame rate might be another thing, too.
Yeah, the weird smoothing thing you can do on TVs now, where old
Does
TVs
not
were
transition
not
well.
made for that. So old games with the refresh rates.
But on top of that, I also beat Jet Force Gemini, which was a great nostalgic romp. But to preface this, I enjoyed both games.
Okay, that is crucial to know. We are not hating
Like
in this instance.
I super enjoyed Jet Force Gemini. It was a great game. It was a great adventure game. But there were issues with the targeting.
No
and,
issues with the target. Go ahead.
and Perfect Dark. Like, through the lens of the time, I understand why it was considered a great successor to GoldenEye, but aged well, it has not.
Perfect Dark being a successor to GoldenEye, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
But both of them suffered from auto-targeting issues and just movement in general. And I'm not sure if that's just the transition from an N64 game to Xbox One or...
Well, they did actually address that. And I think, Mark, you played Jet Force Gemini, yeah, before they patched in the updated controls.
Yeah.
Because those games were made for the Trident that was the N64 controller.
Yes.
And they thought that they could do a one-to-one mapping of the controls from the N64 to the Xbox One controller. It does not translate.
Does not translate. And I think that's the other issue, too, is those older games on a higher refresh rate and on a smoother platform don't work. You're almost better off suited playing those games as they were when you played them originally to get that feel for it. I don't think it would be as throwing you off as much if you were to play on an older TV.
For Jet Force Gemini, like, the running and gunning, shoot, that was never... It was the boss battles that where I got irritated with it.
Well, you had a problem with those Mantis guys?
Oh, they weren't that bad. That's not the worst.
That's one of the ones that held me up.
That's not the worst one.
Was the worst one the guy at the end?
Yes.
That doesn't count because most people didn't get to that because did you ever play Jet Force Gemini?
I did not.
So the trick of Jet Force Gemini, and this was a cruel prank, was the fact that you could cut the heads off of anything in that game, including the Ewok-looking
The
dudes.
tribals that you had to save.
Yep.
And you had to save all of them to get the last part to the ship.
But they didn't tell, and to get to the final boss, you had to get the ship. So until you talk to King Bob at near the end of the game, you could just murder all of them for funsies. And then he goes, hey, by the way, you saved all those guys, right? Because if you didn't, I'm not giving you this. Well, I have all their heads. Does that count for anything? And it most certainly does not.
Now,
I
admittedly,
saved part of them.
now, admittedly, there is a trophy for killing them, so...
There is.
There wasn't in the N64 days. You just did it for Funyun rings. And I know I did. They have shurikens.
They
It
do.
lets you...
And fish food.
Yeah. I mean, what are you supposed to do? That's
That's literally what the description is.
right. I'm only human. Anyways, so I don't think that counts as the most difficult boss because most people didn't get to it. Most of the people I knew when I was in elementary school.
I was gonna say when I was in 64,
I
I did get to it, and
Look at you.
it was just a pain in the ass because the lightning thing that he would shoot
God.
out of his hand was a timing issue, and you had to time your jumps just right because if you did it too soon, you would jump right into it, and if you did it too late, you would get caught up against the corner and it would kill you.
Will take like large portions.
The toxic
of your-
breath was easy to dodge. The laser eyes were easy to dodge, but that electric hand, you had to. The trick was watching the shadow on the ground. If you watched the shadow on the ground, you could time
I
your
didn't do it
jumps.
that way. I just watched him.
No, the trick is the shadow.
Well, that would have helped Brent however long ago. But this made me think, what improvements have we personally seen in shooter games over our lifetimes? And we're going to hit this in real broad strokes because how long have you guys been playing shooting games at this point? Decade and a half easy.
GoldenEye was one of the
Yeah,
first games I ever
GoldenEye.
had.
Yeah, there you go. Even earlier than that.
Yep.
So we're going to hit this in real broad strokes, and I just want to touch on the fact that we acknowledge that the PC was doing shooting games long before consoles were doing it. In fact, the first console game that I could find that was an FPS was a modified version of Doom 64 Wolfenstein 3D. I'm getting my similar FPSs mixed up. One's demons and one's Nazis. But
That's the same thing.
yeah, demon Nazis. I
Yeah.
mean,
Correct.
There's zombie
Wolfendoom.
Nazis, so
And
One of them
depending-
was banned in Germany and one of them wasn't.
And
I can't. It was the one with hell, right?
Totally. It's totally the one with hell that was
Not
banned
the one
in
with
Germany.
not with Robo Hitler.
And let's be fair. I mean, they're connected, kind of
character design wise.
story wise.
Are Wolfendoom?
Yeah.
How are they connected?
Well, that one isn't it Doom? You can play the robot Hitler at one point.
No, that you fight Robot Hitler at the end of that Wolfenstein game.
It's in one of the. We'll look it up afterwards.
Okay, I'm gonna Scrabble rules you on this one. Anyways, so Wolfenstein 3D had a modified port in Japan. That was the first console FPS that I was able to find. But for the most part, the first one that most of us played was on the N64 in the form of GoldenEye. Correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen.
Nope.
Absolutely, it was GoldenEye.
So that was the game that either you had or your friends had, and you went over there and you played it until you passed out. You all thought that Slappers was a good idea, and it was never a good idea.
It's always a great
It
idea.
was
I
a
enjoyed
terrible
I
idea.
enjoyed littering hallways with mines and
About
luring
to-
people in.
Hey, I got banned from using Oddjob because I was too good with the hat.
Yeah, Oddjob was a pain. I remember we had a ban in our house
Because
against
he's shorter,
Oddjob.
so
Yeah.
every time you'd aim, you would be above him, and then the hat would instant kill you.
Yep. Oddjob, we had rules against Oddjob, and we had rules against the Golden Gun, and then everything else was cool. Oh, and I wasn't allowed to use proximity mines because I would disappear for 20 minutes, and then they'd come look for me eventually, and they would just walk into a field of proximity mines.
It's
and I would
funny you
start
bring
cackling.
up proximity mines because when we played Time Splitters as a kid, Time Splitters 2, me and Cody one of our friends figured out that you could put remote mines on a teammate, and I would always be the monkey, which was, again, small and fast. It would run in there and just blow up, and it wouldn't kill me, but it would kill everyone else. So we got banned from using that combo, too.
That's a good
It
one.
was too OP.
Well, you find what works. Anyways, so GoldenEye, everybody enjoyed that game because it was incredibly accessible, yeah? And I guess the weapon types were pretty basic. I mean, there was no extreme depth to it. Now, there were some that shot really fast. The Golden Gun was instant kill.
Rocket
But
launchers had splash damage and esque back then.
as splashy as they could
Could be, right.
And I mean, technically there was body armor,
Yep.
but you didn't. It didn't come up that much in the times I played it.
No,
It
not
would
really.
probably last you like 2 shots.
Well, no, it'd be more than that, but it wasn't that much.
It was never heavily used in multiplayer.
There would be like
my
maybe a couple
recollections.
levels that had
Yeah.
it in one spot as a power up, but
For the most part, it wasn't anybody camping the body armor.
No, it didn't make that much of a difference.
But that then led into the game Brent was talking about earlier, Perfect Dark. Now, how often did you guys play Perfect Dark? Did you play that nearly as much? That came out much closer to the end of the N64, if memory serves.
I mean, I played it later on. I played it during the N64 days, but I didn't really heavily play it until later on when a friend of mine had it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really about my experience with it, but I have played all the way through it and did play the multiplayer side of it as well.
What about you, Mike? You look confused.
No, I was trying to remember any specifics about the game because I never owned it personally. My friend in Virginia got it just before we moved, and I played it a handful of times with him, and then we moved to Germany, and I didn't ever pick it up myself.
The only thing I really remembered about it were two things. One, it felt like GoldenEye, but more sci-fi, which was kind of the whole point.
Yep, because aliens.
Right, because aliens. Elvis was in it, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yes, he was. And two, if you turned on slow-mo Farsight, I think it was, the game was completely broken. Because what the Farsight was essentially a sniper gun that let you see through walls.
Yep.
And if slow-mo was on, everybody else slowed down when you scoped them. It completely broke the game because you could just sit in scope mode and pick people off, and they couldn't do nothing. So I kind of enjoyed it.
Plus predetermined spawn points.
I'd say you're speaking from experience over here.
That's something that's changed too, is having predetermined spawn points and random spawn points. But we'll get to that later.
We will. And on N64, there were other first-person
There was
shooters.
another James Bond game for The World Is Not Enough. I had that.
I did too.
I remember that. That was the one with the blue cartridge, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And-
I don't ever remember playing that.
Really? You never
Really?
played it at my house? I mean, it was fun.
But
it was
not-
a step up from the first one, but I mean, by that point, it was the end of the N64, so...
Yeah.
Right, and a thing that happened during N64 was the PlayStation 1 introduced the DualShock controller. Now, you'll remember that the PlayStation didn't start with the DualShock controller. That was something that they adopted later. And I remember there was a quote for an Alien game, I believe, where it was amazing to see how time has progressed, because it was the first game that used the dual stick control scheme where one was to move and one was to aim. And there was a review that explicitly said, the scariest thing about this game is the controls. One stick to aim, one stick to move. This will never catch on. And I just had a good hearty laugh about that. Because I didn't, if memory serves me correctly, I didn't own any shooters on PlayStation 1. Did anybody here?
I didn't have a PlayStation. I've actually never owned a PlayStation.
There were some games that they didn't utilize the two-stick control scheme because it was like Lara Croft had gun shooting action, but that was more of a platformer to me than a shooter. There was you shot dinosaurs, if memory serves. I think at the end of the first game you killed aliens, maybe. I don't remember the specifics. It was bizarre. But I don't think I ever played an actual shooter on the PS1 because back then I was max weeaboo. I was all at RPGs. So it wasn't until the PS2 generation, which with the PS2, that's the Xbox as well. And here's where you guys are going to be able to start shining, because one of the first games I ever owned for the PS2 was Red Faction. And the big thing about Red Faction was destructible environments. You guys remember that?
Yep.
Yes.
That was a misleading promise because it only let you just destroy so much and certain things. They're like, oh, you can destroy all the pillars in this room, but not the middle parts of the pillars. That would be too much. So I remember begging my mom to buy it for me, and she goes, well, this game's rated mature. Are you sure that I should buy this for you? I'll cut you a deal, Mom. If I ever have a submachine gun on Mars, then we can talk. And that's how I got Red Faction. But I don't honestly remember a ton about it because the first one wasn't that interesting. Did you guys play it?
I only ever played it with other people,
No.
so I don't remember.
So you played the
I know of it.
multiplayer.
I just
yeah.
I remember Destructive Environment because
That
it was
it.
cool.
Right.
Yeah, before you just had barrels that exploded, and that
Yeah.
was as close as destructive environment as you got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Crates.
that was a big deal at the time, and I couldn't help but think as I was playing Arkham Knight somewhat recently, and I power slid through a support beam. I'm like, how far we've come. But so during the PS2 Xbox generation, the big thing that happened with shooters is your guys' bread and butter. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's Halo.
Absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely.
what did Halo do that really, exploded the competitive shooter, because I know that there were games like Unreal, they ported Duke Nukem over. Duke Nukem was on N64, Duke Nukem was on PS1.
You did miss Doom 64 too?
I'm sure I did miss Doom 64. There was a bajillion iterations of Wolfenstein, Doom, Duke Nukem, but did any of us in here play much of those?
No.
A little
I've
bits,
Doom,
but
that's about it.
where we're at now is like you said, our bread and butter.
Right. I played a little bit of Duke Nukem on the N64 because there were boobies.
Yep.
And I was, this guy. I'm like, oh man, grade school and boobies. They're pixelated, but they're boobies.
But yep.
We're awesome. And that's about all I really have
And
to say.
taking a piss in a video game.
Yeah. When we get to Duke Nukem Forever, that'll come full circle,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
That golden ticket that was cashed so much later.
Yeah, I bought it. I'll be able to talk about it. But what did Halo do? Now, you guys didn't have a ton of experience with FPSs prior to... You had GoldenEye.
GoldenEye. There's a couple other shooters in N64 we've touched on, like Jet Force Gemini and a couple other ones.
But even Jet Force Gemini could generously be called a third-person shooter with a lot of action platformer elements. And we'll also talk about third-person shooters, but I don't really think those came to prominence, in my personal opinion, until approximately like RE4 and Gears of War.
Right.
What would you say?
I was just saying Star Wars Battlefront had a huge following.
I was going to give it to Battlefront.
Yeah.
So I would give it to Battlefront, and then Battlefront died. So what picked up the torch after Battlefront? Because there was still a gap there, wasn't there?
I mean, yeah, Battlefront 2 and Battlefront 1 were on the Xbox and PS2, so...
That is true. So
I mean, if you include PC, that would also be around Battlefield 1942 era.
was Battlefield?
No, that was first person.
I was about to say, I thought that was first
Oh,
person.
Battlefield's been first person?
Yeah, no, that is first person. Okay, yeah, because
So-
that in Vietnam and all that. Okay, yeah,
So-
third person wise, yeah, no, that would be it.
I'm about to say,
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not trying to belittle those
No.
ones. I just
No, yeah, I'm trying to think, and I can't really remember any other ones that were.
I mean, MGS, would you consider?
no, because that's tactical stealth action. It's right in the name.
Let's be...
Plus, it was
let's be-
also kind of top down. I mean, it wasn't
first-
really
yeah.
third person.
third person, we're talking over the
Yeah.
shoulder.
In
Yeah,
the second one, you can, when you aim...
yeah, but that's when you aim. That's you're still eye in the sky.
But let's be perfectly honest. Stealth was optional.
Yeah,
Well,
it-
that could be said about Splinter Cell, which I played, and
I
I,
feel like
did not.
Splinter Cell
stealth.
was way more...
that was way stealthier.
Yeah,
and
it
you
was-
died real fast.
Yeah,
in
that
some
was
of those.
that was still an
I was
option.
going to say, I know watching people who didn't, like Cody, would not play stealth in an MGS game and just go guns a-blazing.
Right.
I did too all the
I
time.
know, and it's like, what are you guys doing?
But,
Killing things.
But back to what we were talking about. Halo. Because third person shooter we'll get to, because minus Battlefront, which all you nerds played, I can't think of much else, and neither can you. Anyways, Halo, what did it do that was special?
Well, I think it was the way it was developed that made it special, because it was originally an RTS, and then they revamped it and it was a third-person shooter, and then Microsoft bought Bungie and it was redone as a first-person shooter. So it had a lot of elements from those other styles that it brought into its FPS gameplay, and I think that's what attracted a lot of people to it.
Now,
That and the sci-fi aspect of it was the first time we really kind of had a sci-fi-esque shooter that was of that kind of caliber. And then the other thing too is the multiplayer for me would have to be the changing there is just so well balanced.
Now, did you find that it was different in any regards? Because I believe Halo had a larger amount of mobility and somewhat accessibility, because I'm sure there were games that had regenerating shields prior to Halo, but I feel like Halo popularized it significantly.
The original Halo did not have regen
Did
shields.
it not?
It did not.
Nope.
You
But-
had to pick up health and stuff.
Fancy that.
The other thing too is this is when we started getting jumping mechanics.
I'm about to say the jumping thing was a big deal, especially because I know the PC version, I think you could
Because beforehand it was
have
just
the
crouching.
flying. Right.
Because if I remember it, you could crouch in GoldenEye.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
you
you
could
100%
couldn't jump.
could. I know you could crouch in GoldenEye because that's how Oddjob became invincible.
Yes, but
Yeah.
you could not jump.
And I remember that there was actually even some verticality to Halo because I think in the PC version you could pilot the flying vehicles, couldn't
Yes.
you? Which otherwise wouldn't be in the console versions until the second game?
Are you talking multiplayer-wise?
Yes.
Multiplayer-wise, you had the PC one, which was Combat Evolved, which added some elements of vehicles in it. But I don't remember... You had the tanks...
I
Yeah, the
never
Banshees.
played the original. I played Combat Evolved, and then I played the re-release on.
the original one-
I had the PC version. There were vehicles you could play. You
Yeah,
could
but on
play
the
console,
actual...
I don't remember.
On the
'Cause those
actual
were some-
console, you could still do Banshees. That was the only
Yeah.
flying one you could do was
Okay.
Banshees.
I couldn't remember if you had flying vehicles in the first one on
Yes.
consoles. I know you did in the PC one because I watched Brent play and he'd be like, "Get away from the flying thing!" And that made
yes.
my day.
Yeah, being able to fly those was actually a holdover from when it was a third-person game, which is why those were done in third-person point of view.
Makes sense. So we're not going to dwell too much on the specifics of the individual games because we did a whole episode on Halo games. So
But I'd say the thing that it did the most is the balance. For as far as a multiplayer aspect, it's by far still one of the best balanced games that I've ever played in a multiplayer.
It was one of the first real multiplayer FPSs
Where you could be competitive.
Yeah, you could be competitive. You could sit and you could play with your friends, and everybody could have fun for hours.
on consoles. Because I know that they had like Unreal Tournament and Quake and all that on PC. They never really made the transition to consoles, even though I know Unreal Tournament did come to at least one console. And it never quite had the action. At least I never saw the popularity on consoles for Unreal Tournament that it had on PC. Whereas Halo thrived. And around because Halo came out in early 2000s-ish.
I want to say 2001.
Somewhere around there.
And then the second one would have come out in mid 2000s-ish because that was a big deal. That was
04, I believe.
that was still Xbox though.
That
Because
was still the original Xbox, but that was dual wielding.
Yes. that
which
was the-
there was a big
Big
change
change.
right there, and I'm sure we talked about in the Halo episode. And it was interesting to me that when other first-person shooters started coming out a little later
2001.
for the first one,
Yes.
Bam, spot on.
when other first-person shooters came out, BioShock came out in 2006. Now, this was where I started to really get into first-person shooters. Because with BioShock 1, I was seeing some interesting innovations that had been done in earlier first-person shooters like Halo 2, but I'm forgetting some of the even earlier ones that, Brent, you were a big fan of some franchises that
Yeah.
came out before that.
I was a fan of Killzone on the PS2.
Now, what about that really called to you?
It was the first one I ever had where you could snap to cover, to use cover as a defensive mechanism.
Now, that's interesting, the snap to cover idea, because we're going to talk about some third-person shooters that relied so heavily on cover that I would say they arguably negatively influenced the industry.
Yeah, I wouldn't
personally.
say that's not what this is. You could just use cover.
Right. You didn't rely exclusively on cover.
No.
Okay.
So
And so going back to the other first-person shooters, BioShock in this case, the first BioShock, I didn't play competitive multiplayer shooters. I owned Halo 1, 2, and 3, and I was awful at them. I beat them, went online once. I'm like, I'm terrible at this. So then I just went to single-player shooters. Now, when I played the first BioShock, the premise intrigued me immensely, and I'm pretty sure everybody in here has played it. But you couldn't dual-wield in the first BioShock. When you were using your plasmids and your weapons, you had to switch back and forth.
Yep.
So that's when the second one came out in 2008-ish. 2008 or 2009. I remember because I was at my undergrad at the time. They're like, you can have plasmids in one hand and guns in the other. That's amazing. Why wasn't this in the first one? No. But anyways, I know that some of the other multiplayer games, they were doing a lot to try and include accessibility, because what I know we did a whole thing on Halo, but between Halo 2 and 3, what was the big change between those?
They took dual wielding away again.
They took it away?
They took it away.
They took it away.
That was a big difference. You got a lot more. The game became a lot more vertical. They did a lot to do with Chief's movement. The game itself became a lot more vertical. The maps were bigger. Can't remember anything. What were any other big changes between 2 and 3?
You had more vehicle options. You had more weapon options. You had more customization with your Spartan itself. They started introducing those elements where you could change pieces and looks. That's where that started to come into play. Because 2, you had the ability to be an elite, and then 3, you had the ability to be an elite that had different looks, or a Spartan that had different looks, and then 4, that's when they really started to change that.
Yeah.
So compare and contrast, Brent. I know that on PS3, Killzone had more games, and they also started up a new franchise you were a big fan of. I would like to touch on the cover-based shooter after this. I believe some of these will involve that. So go ahead.
Killzone 2, because the first one probably had multiplayer on the PS2. God, if I
Nobody
remember.
played multiplayer on the PS2.
But yeah,
not online.
Besides Halo, the first place for online I started doing with Killzone, 2 and 3, the second one. It was generally your average-based first-person shooter. The first Killzone didn't have jump like Halo did. They did add that into the second and third one.
Didn't they have some sort of dash though?
They had a dash, and in the first Killzone you could dive over objects, and that stayed in the other games to leap over objects, but they also added hop. If you're at cover, you can get over it.
Okay, got it. So it allows you to mount cover.
Yeah, they added a lot of stuff for online play.
And there was another game that came out on the PS3 that you were a huge fan of.
Yeah, Resistance. I mostly got into the same way you did BioShock for story. That's why I got into story mode. I really liked the gameplay of that, and it had similar elements to Killzone.
But you played that game online, didn't you?
Yeah, I played the second and third one online. I did not play the first one.
Okay. Now, was there anything that game did?
The second one had multiple modes. There was your standard, capture the flag, two-side team kill match thing. But then it had a story-based one where you got into a team together. You had to go through these missions.
Intriguing.
Yeah.
So around the time of Halo 3-ish, a game came out that I think fundamentally changed how a lot of shooters approached how they were doing their gameplay. And that game was Gears of War. And what that did... Now, Mike seems to be pretty stoked about this. Mike, what did you like so much about the first Gears of War?
The first one, what I liked mostly about it was different.
It was different. And was that because it played different? Because...
Yes, it was really my first straight third-person shooter that I'd ever played before. So it was a different gameplay style in general for me. So it'll always kind of have that connection.
And that game, at least where we were all in our lives, that was pretty much the perfect game for somebody our age at that point. Because you were a bunch of dude bros with chainsaws on your guns fighting against these terrible monsters in the night. Couldn't have been better. And every time you cleared a room, there was an awesome guitar riff. It was pretty much perfectly formulated for somebody at our age.
Maybe that's why it doesn't help. Maybe that's why it doesn't help that I didn't play them until later, fully after you gave me your review of the second one.
And, okay, we'll touch on what changed.
Plus nobody in that planet, either you're skinny and then all of a sudden you just roid out.
I don't feel like mechanics are what affected those games.
Well, the first game, it was interesting because... Have we ever done a series on the Gears? Have we done an episode? We've talked briefly about
where you
them.
answer more questions as you go backwards than forwards.
Oh, buddy.
The story makes more sense if you start with the last game and play in the other direction.
Now, when you say last, you mean third.
That was the last game.
The fourth one achieved what all the others hadn't at that point.
Yeah, I actually kind of cared. But we're going to talk about Gears at some point, because you still haven't played the fourth one.
I have also not played the fourth one.
I have not.
I know I'm not missing anything with Judgment, but the fourth one I would like.
That was my problem. See, I got into Judgment, and everyone was like, "It's just going to be a fanboy service." Well, that's fine. I'm a fanboy. And then
it's no, this is
2-3 levels in. Well, I'm bored, and this was a waste of money.
Judgment is a time I wish that we recorded our planes.
We had a hoot and a half, but that was only because we were playing it we were Mystery Science Theatering it.
Oh.
It was rough. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves on this one. At the time, in the right year of 2007, Gears of War scratched a very particular itch. It did some things incredibly well. For example, I can't think of another game that did the active reload, a game that rewarded you for timing your reload.
Yeah.
That was awesome. You felt amazing when you active reload, popped out of cover, and took out a guy.
You felt terrible when you didn't.
Yeah.
And that was my problem. It was more the other direction.
Really?
It's just a frustration I didn't need. I was
Okay.
trying to kill things. That was something between me and killing things.
And see, that's why I was immediately drawn to Gears of War, because there are 2 achievements associated with active reloading. The Zen of Reloading, which you get for getting so many active reloads, and the Zen of Reloading 2 for getting 5 in a row. I got the Zen of Reloading 2 before I got the other one. So I was immediately taken with this concept. And in the first one, you couldn't bleed out while you were on the ground. That was important because that meant me and my buddy from Walmart at the time, we played through that game on the hardest difficulty first. So we rolled crazy hard on that. So when the second one came out, does anybody have any additional thoughts about the first one where the bad guy was actually intimidating even though the game itself was 5 hours long?
And you had the creatures of the night that were scary and terrifying.
Yeah, the things that were named after the microscopic
the
ocean
krill.
my
the
God.
krill.
They were so much scarier back then because now they're just they're sea creatures of the dark.
The first time you ever, in that first level where it's dark, and the first time you ever step out into the dark, it's like, whoa,
oh, this is terrible.
that's a game changer.
And then it is literally a game changer because they got rid of them at the end of the first game. And do you remember what they replaced the environmental hazard with? Razor hail in the second
That's what
game.
it was.
That's right.
Oh, I remember now.
With glass from the sky.
Yeah,
Because
I remember Razor Hill, and I'm like, why would they choose to live on this planet? What is going on?
I don't
It's like,
Again,
oh,
the water's
it's
made of
Razor
steroids.
Hail, so everyone go inside. What do you mean, oh, it's Razor Hail?
why is this okay to you people? Yeah.
Their equivalent of the Dust Bowl.
And that was my problem with the second one there were so many other problems with the second.
If we have not done, we need to
We
just
need
roll
to do a
hard on this
series on. We need to roll because the second one, there were strong. I remember Aaron and I, while we were up at ISU, we played through it in a weekend, and afterwards we were like, "This was fun, but this was super dumb." The gameplay was solid. It was interesting. The new things they added, new weapons, new ways to approach some of the fights. But the story was terabad. But I believe they introduced a multiplayer gameplay mode in the second game that supposedly was super beneficial for multiplayer. But again, I really didn't care about multiplayer. And being 100% frank, Aaron is not super great at shooting games. So I had no desire to pursue that. Now, Mike, Mark, Brent, did you guys play through Gears 2? I believe you played through 1, 2, and 3, Mike.
Yes, I played through all
3
three.
is the only one I've only ever watched.
Yeah. Yeah, you watched me and Jake beat that, didn't you?
Yeah,
That's destroyed any.
About to say, and we tried to play through that with you, Mark,
Yeah.
and we got about halfway through. We got to the Lambent Berserker.
Yes.
I'm like, "Ugh." Well, because half of us were playing on Insane, and the other, Mark was playing on Normal or Hardcore,
I think it was hardcore.
and Brent was either playing on Normal or Babytown Frolics. I don't remember. And as soon as the Lambent Berserker would touch me or the other guy, that was it.
And then
Game.
it would rely on me and Brent, and then it was usually me getting you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All I remember about the second one is when I'm like, oh, you guys played the second Gears. Is it any good? And you're like, here's a video demonstrating the plot.
So there's a video online on Newgrounds, I believe, that sums up the plot of Gears of War 2 in about 90 seconds. Like, what are those things? What is this thing? Is
Maria,
that
no!
Maria,
Who
no!
are they, Marcus? Maria. We gotta find Maria.
Who's Maria?
Yeah. Oh my god.
Who is she, Marcus? It's the queen.
Fight for your queen, my children. Marcus, what the hell is going on?
Where's Maria?
Oh no. Maria! Bah. Marcus, what the hell's going on? I have no idea. Bam! And that was it.
Coltrane!
We have to do a series about this.
We might as well just replay all of them at this point.
No. So, the third game introduced even more interesting gameplay. Specifically, the Horde mode in that game, in the third one, was amazing. I love that game. I think I put 90 hours into that game, and 80 of it was into that Horde mode. I got up to the silverback in that Horde by myself, and then I would go camp in the corner and just take out about 35 waves.
I can remember we would set up specific horde mode nights. It was the first game I can remember us really doing that with, where we would set aside, like, all right, on Friday we're all going to get on and we're going to do horde mode, and that's what we're going to do for 5 hours.
Oh, so good. I don't think I ever played horde mode with you.
I don't think so. I usually played with Ryan, my brother Jake, and then random other 2 guys would hop in.
I was gonna say, I
randomly,
know
but-
we have before.
I'm about to say we played, and once we played with Ryan, and you might have been involved. I don't remember. It was super fun. I can't remember the last time I said I want to play this shooter with my friends. It just never really happened. But one thing that I think that series wrecked for shooters for about a decade was you had to run from cover to cover in third-person shooters. Like, the idea to snap into cover, like, you couldn't run and gun anymore.
It was a cool concept that was just overplayed.
So brutally overdone. And by the time the 4th Gears game came out, Gears of War Judgment, everybody's like, this is a joke. Nobody cares. This is ridiculous. And you saw some games, like, for example, Uncharted. That game should have been a fun Indiana Jones exploration game. But instead, the first one, if you didn't hide behind cover, some MRFer from a million miles away would blow your brains out with a Desert Eagle. It sucked. And I blame Gears of War for that. Because the story in those games, 1, 2, 3, and 4, all fantastic. The gameplay in the first one, not great. The gameplay in the second one, awesome. Third one, okay. Fourth one, super good. That is my brief overview of the Uncharted series. It got better as it progressed because it realized it could stand on its own legs. Play the games. That's all I got.
That's almost a topic in itself, too. Those games that copy formulas that they see are really good in one game and then move them to another.
Yeah.
Not realizing, like you said, they could stand on their own because they have enough elements that allows them to be different. But they're like, that worked. Let's do that.
There is
Such as Call of Duty, which is a shooter.
Yeah, so that's a first person one, and we'll try to mush these together because you guys played Call of Duty, maybe Battle, other something.
Battlefield,
Battlefield, all the Call of Duties.
Counter-Strike, Rainbow. I mean, there's tons of them.
So the Rainbow Six games were more of a tactical first person
They
shooter.
were one of the first tactical ones where a lot of games beforehand, if you got hit, you could, hide and kind of recoup some of your health, or you'd find a health pack and you'd make it. You'd get through it.
Mm-hmm.
Rainbow, on the other hand, was not forgiving. You go around a corner and you didn't check your 6, and you just one shot, you were down, and it was hurt. You were just hurting. You might as well just restart the level at that point.
Yeah, we were talking about that before we started recording, actually, how that was a huge change for me when the first time I played Rainbow Six. Is I was used to actually taking a couple of rounds to get an idea of where everyone was in the room, and then just heal back for a second. And the second I stuck my head out, bam! Oh, well, alrighty then. Restart level.
That's where it was real important to use your squad mates and send them in first and check the room that way. But yeah, that was rough.
You, cannon fodder, get in there.
Yeah, it was almost like Counter-Strike too. I mean, Counter-Strike wasn't forgiving at all either. You got hit in that and you were down.
Yeah.
Those games focused real heavily on the realism sort of aspect
Yes.
of it, where you weren't really expected to be able to take multiple bullets.
It's like your racing games too. You have your fun racing games, and then you have your like super simulated racing games. And this was kind of that equivalent, where you had your fun shooters, and then you have your like, I want realistic tactics, and I have to work how to take these people out. And if I mess up, it's gonna be real world scenario. I'm dead.
Dead forever.
Yep.
$60 gone.
Yep.
Game's locked out.
Yep. Hardcore mode, like what was it, Diablo, where you just lose everything.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's not talk about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that
original
was,
Metal Gear Solid, where you just it ended the game if you got caught.
yeah. But no, I think that was the changing for like Rainbow stuff, is it was very tactics based. You had to really strategize what was going on. From a shooter standpoint, the mechanics were great. As far as the gunplay and all that, but it was not forgiving. If you made a mistake, just like in real life, that's going to cost you.
So was there a point, because I've noticed there's been a trend recently, but was there a point where you felt you were getting fatigued even slightly with the shooter genre because of repetition, or because I know that in a lot of quote unquote war shooters like Medal of Honor, Battlefront, Battlefield, You can tell I played these games a lot. Well, they stopped using World War II. It's like, we have played this out to death. People stopped
coming back.
And now it's coming back.
Well, we took a long enough break. It's time to loop back around.
We
Right.
just take a long enough break. We went to the future and destroyed that, and now we're back.
Went to the future, destroyed that, went too far back into the past. So like, we overshot World War II. We're in World War I. We need to...
So that game did really well.
That game did really well, and I've got a lot of friends that still play it heavily.
So, did you guys find yourself fatigued in with any particular thing that shooters were doing? Were you sick of a setting? Were you sick of something that they were? I was sick of the cover-based third-person shooter. I was sick of... That was the big one. The cover-based third-person shooter, because I just felt like it all played the same.
I don't really think I ever really get fatigued with shooters, because out of what I do game-wise, shooters are my number one thing that I do. So I don't ever really get bored with them. Worst case scenario, I'm just going to hop on Halo multiplayer and just play that out for a while, or Titanfall, and do that for a while, and just cycle between them for minute differences. But I don't really get fatigued with them. I'm still playing a shooter. I'm just going from one shooter to another. It's not like I'm like, okay, I'm going to go play a racing game now, or I'm going to go play this.
I definitely was getting worn out with the World War II setting, but that was right when they announced Modern Warfare. It was almost like they knew.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, we know we burned you guys out. We've done a lot of World War II, so now we're going to give you something that you were not prepared for, and it was phenomenal. I still remember, again, we were talking about it before, the opening cinematics. And actually, it's something that would have worked for your sad games as well. Yeah, the fact that your main character that you started with in Modern Warfare died.
Well, and then it's funny because now, mind you, it was great, too, in one sense that somebody we knew, they're like, you have to check out this scene in Modern Warfare. And he showed me the scene where the guy dies of radiation poisoning. Like, I have no connection with this guy. You just showed me them kill the little girl in Schindler's List. I don't know who this little girl is. Maybe she's a monster. I don't know. I need context, man.
Context was very important for
Crucial.
that scene.
But it did grow. The context did grow when you started switching to some characters that later on did die, that you had played, and then you watched, as you played a different character, interact with that character you had played in the previous game. And then when you watch them go, it's like, oh, that right in the feels.
That one got me a lot, yeah. When you were then the partner from the guy that you played with in the first one, and then when he went down, you were like, whoo. That I spent
a whole game with you.
A lot of time and a substantial amount of effort with you.
I got made fun of for being that guy.
Yeah. It did really get me. It was one of the ones that got me in the feels.
So, speaking of getting you in the feels, did you feel that they immediately, I'm not going to say immediately, but they may have invalidated some of that significance? Because I heard in the second one, they kill your main character like 4 times.
It's another example, like you were saying earlier, of they overdid it. They realized that they hit on something that it really affected people, and they were like, oh, this is great. Do it 5 times. Do it 10 times. It'll be phenomenal. And then we just got bored, because then it was just...
And that's where the third one didn't do that.
Press Q to pay respects.
Yeah, like, reload, all right, whatever.
Next. Don't even care.
They're just avatars now.
New mag, new round.
Too quick, yeah.
So, okay. The reason I was asking, because I felt that there was a lot of... The games I play, because they're mostly story-focused, the BioShock, etc. Don't get me wrong. Love BioShock 2. Infinite, I felt the story was fantastic, but the gameplay felt like it could have used some work. I really didn't like the gameplay for the main game. The DLCs, phenomenal. Mark, you haven't got around to Infinite, play the DLCs for Infinite. That might as well be BioShock Infinite 2. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. Anyways, so they announced we're bringing out Doom and Wolfenstein again. Like, interesting. They go, these are going to be your old school run and gun games. Now I'm intrigued. And I played Doom and Wolfenstein The New Order, and I went, Brent, you have to play these games.
I've played Doom.
And what'd you think of it, Brent?
It took a little bit to get used to that old school shooter feel.
You do not sit still. You stop. I think it even says in the menu, when you stop moving, you die.
Jumping, it's running, it's gunning. You don't stop. They are everywhere there.
It's great. I love it. And they recently announced Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus. Yeah. which they leaked last year, so I was waiting a year for that. Actually, I think I was the only person excited about that during the E3 thing.
I think Jake might have been excited about that.
Jake's not as excited.
Not as
Josh
excited,
is.
but
I guess this is where I throw in Jake's negativity to these games.
Yeah, let's not. Jake's not here. He can leave a comment. Leave a comment, Jake. Negative Nancy. No, there's plenty of time for negativity, but you gotta be here to represent your negativity. We're not doing negativity by proxy. All right? Representative. Anyways, so as far as other third-person shooter, first-person innovations, one game that really jumped out at me that the third-person action really kicked it up a notch was Resident Evil. So the fourth game blew a lot of people away because it did the third person, and it allowed for a sense of immersion that wasn't quite as intense as first person, but it allowed you to really keep the whole atmosphere and, in a way, created a different sense of immersion because you could be horrifically mutilated in RE4.
You really could. That chainsaw would get you.
Oh, man. So RE4, you didn't play through RE4, Mike, did you?
4, I did not. I wasn't a big fan of the games up till that point, and no one was able to convince me that 4 was that different, so I didn't touch it.
It was
4 was kind of like this is where the series gets good.
Yeah.
This was one of my favorite games back when GameCube was real strong.
I think I have beaten that game at this point. I think I beat it 4 times on PS2. I beat it at least once on the Wii, twice on the Xbox 360. I adored this game. Super fun, and the character designs were phenomenal. I mean, I think I told you about this somewhat
Character
recently.
designs, collecting things was great inside of it. The puzzles were good.
That was a very solid game. And I know, Mike, you played RE5. Now, Brent, you have it turns out that there is a very strong conflicting opinion. If you played RE5 with another person, you loved it.
Yeah.
If you played RE5 by yourself, you wanted to kill yourself.
Yep.
Mark.
I did not play RE5.
Well, see, that's interesting. I played it both ways. I loved it both ways.
That AI can go screw itself.
Really? I was about to say, the AI was one of the things I loved about it.
Really?
Brent hated it.
I can cite what was it, a flying crab monster, whatever you're fighting. You have to place down mines, and she ran behind me and picked him up. I'm like, what are you doing? You are stupid. I would sit there and shoot at her because I wish the bullets would kill her.
And that was... So a couple things that I heard she would do is she would reload unnecessarily. You would have a little sliver of damage.
Well, it's not even that. I couldn't beat the Wesker final battle, and Josh was like, what's taking you so long?
Spoilers.
I'm sorry. Crab Wesker.
Okay.
And Josh was like, what's taking you so long? And he's at my house, and he's watching. He's like, oh my God, she's terrible.
Yeah. So I had only played this game co-op only. By the time I played it with somebody who wasn't Aaron, I had put 50 hours into that game. Okay. We beat that up, down, left, right, side to side. We crushed it. And Brent's like, this game sucks so bad. How does this suck so bad? He's like, watch. And he gives her just like a first aid kit. He's like,
no, you can't give her any kind of first aid. No, that's a noob mistake.
No, you can't give her a weapon.
You can't give her almost anything.
I had to take it off.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, like, story-wise, man, that game...
What? No. At some point, we'll talk about Resident Evil, and that game's always been ridiculous.
For that, so.
Dude, it gets a pass on the fact that you defeat the final boss by punching a boulder.
Yeah, you punch that boulder so hard.
If it isn't back someday as a lava monster, I'm going to be pissed.
I was pretty disappointed when in
so
RE6...
much chaff.
The world is so much chaff.
Poor.
Complete global saturation.
Maybe we should talk about that game sometime. Anyways, so the sixth one got around the fact that your AI person was worthless by making them an unkillable demigod. They could not run out of ammo, and they couldn't die in the sixth one. The sixth one was not very good. So that's when the seventh one came out, and they go, this is a first-person shooter now. I went, I'm intrigued. And it ended up being phenomenal. Nobody else here has played it, right?
No, I still really badly want to play it.
Half of it.
Yeah, you watched me play a lot of it. It's so good. So good. Now, it falls apart a little bit near the end because it becomes way more shooter happy. Now, you look like you had something to add there, Mike.
Well, I was going to say specifically, the big thing for me with the horror-style games is I prefer them in third person, because otherwise they're too immersive. I break controllers.
Yeah, I gotta say, and we're talking about shooters in this
Dead
one.
Space.
Well, we're talking about shooters in this one. Otherwise, I'd talk about the immersive nature of first-person horror games, looking at you, Amnesia, Outlast. We're going to talk about those at some point because me and Brent have a rip-roaring good time with the first Outlast. The exact quote, and this will be the tag, "There's no evidence that that monster was ever following me," and I turned around, it was right there. Oh my god! And yeah, if we could have taken a picture of that. But neither here nor there. So we are just about to run out of time. What are some final thoughts you guys want to give about where shooters are right now and what you hope they change? I personally hope that third-person shooters continue to do this blend. Like the fourth Gears of War game did a good mix of engaging and you still have to do some cover-based shooter. I like the fact that the cover is disintegrating now. I like the fact that first-person games are mixing up better AI with needing cover. So you can run and gun in some cases, but there's instances where, for example, in the new Wolfenstein game, if you dealt with a snipe, you could sneak through areas because there were snipers, and as soon as they found you, boom, now you're old school again. They're getting smarter about their design, and I want to see more of that because I don't know, I feel like we've come too far. We can't go back.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing for me would be I'm a big fan of how they're currently doing a lot of blending. So you're not getting a lot of just pure FPS or just pure third-person shooters anymore. Mm-hmm. At least not really in my realm or scope. But other things I was going to bring up were things like Borderlands and Destiny.
Borderlands, Destiny, Fallout.
Yes. You've got enough FPS that it keeps you interested because it's fun. It's fun to shoot things and watch them blow up and die. But you have enough other aspects that it also doesn't get boring or grindy at all. And I want to see a lot more of that moving forward. A big one on the third-person shooter side would be Mass Effect. It's an absolutely phenomenal game. We could talk about that.
Oh, yes. Me and you could absolutely talk about that for
insane lengths. Also, your GTAs, your Saints Row, even the Division to an extent, even though that kind of sucked when it first came out. The update made it better.
Patches for everyone.
Woo, patches for days. Mark.
My main thing is just as far as because I enjoy multiplayer stuff, is keeping the balance. The balance thing needs to really stay strong. With Halo and Destiny, those are two games, be it have been designed by Bungie and then continued on through 343. That balance needs to stay there with a lot of the shooters from a multiplayer aspect. You see some games stutter a bit. Battlefield stutters sometimes. You have Call of Duty stutters sometimes, depending if it's the Activision version ones or if it's the Treyarch ones.
I had forgotten their name.
So clunky. So
It had been so long since I had played one of theirs.
All the Black Ops games are terrible, but like Battlefront, I think has a lot of promise, the newer one that's coming out, for keeping that balance. Just from looking at the reviews that have come out from E3, the balance seems to be there, and I really hope they keep that trend of making it fair for everyone. Just not breaking things.
You should listen to that mini-sode Brent did about Battlefront 2.
Yeah, I saw Cross's remarks on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of the Battlefront 2 thing, because especially allowing everything to be free for access instead of having to pay for it, so everyone has everything available to them. But to counter your because I agree having things meld genres, I guess. Like Killzone 4 tried to do that, bring stealth into a super actiony genre. Did not work well.
You can't have forced stealth like that.
It needs to be optional.
The problem is it was a game created for... Usually in the other ones you had squad mates, and in this one you're doing half of it on your own. It's just not, it doesn't... When the other gameplay didn't change with what they wanted you to do, it did not work well.
It looked pretty, though.
It did. And the multiplayer was phenomenal, but...
You played that for quite a while, didn't you?
But I
usually play all of them.
I agree with you. The whole pay-to-win thing needs to stop. Just don't do that.
That is an
that needs to
entirely...
die.
But that is a good point about both the balance and the online multiplayer. Everything I loved in Doom, the fast-paced gameplay, the run and gun, etc., that did not translate to online at all. They needed to think through how they were doing their online, because I talked with Brent before the show about this, and he said the reason I play online multiplayer when it comes to shooters is so I can take everything I love about this shooter and take it online. That was not in Doom at all. Not enjoyable. Occasionally you turned into a monster. Can't remember why. So that does need to be something when they are creating their multiplayer experience. They need to give better consideration, like you were mentioning with Balance, Mark, and like we entirely missed, like with Overwatch, which I have never touched.
Oh, so good.
Overwatch is a lot of fun as well.
So good. Gotta start playing those games.
You bring up a good point with that. These two styles have become so popular. You could do just a podcast on these two styles of games, and you could have plenty and plenty and plenty to go off of. So there's a ton that we can't possibly cover. I feel like no matter how much we talk about, I'm going to feel like we missed pieces. Like, I still want to say Ratchet & Clank was a phenomenal third-person shooter.
Well, yeah, but didn't that game didn't it start more platformy than third-person shootery?
I felt like it was always a pretty good blend, because in every level there was an area where you had to blow the crap out of a bunch of guys.
I have never played any of them, so I can't speak to it, but I will still argue, because that's what I do. Welcome to Co-Opinions.
Phrasing?
Co-Opinions, where Josh's opinion matters more.
Duh. Who's running the show?
Who does the editing?
Yeah, well, I control the Red Bull.
He who controls the Red Bull controls the world.
The bull must flow. But anyways. Ew.
Where's the rock?
Yeah, I was going to say that. No.
Are we not doing phrasing anymore?
And on that note.
On that note, thank you, gentlemen, for coming on. Brent, thank you.
Yep.
Mark, thank you.
Absolutely.
Mike, thank you, and for editing.
Certainly.
I will be doing a careful listen of this one. So don't forget to jump online. Tell us what your favorite shooter was. Tell what we totally missed. Tell what you enjoy, what you wish would go away. But until next time, my name is Josh, and this is Co-Opinions.